Alright, our kid. Nice pint of bodies. Banging. Well, I'm going to cook you something special. I'm going to do you a Mancashire Hotpot. Boeuf Boddington. Can't go wrong. Mancunian through and through. So, let's get on with it. Now, first off, I'm going to have to take the shades off. Can't see what I'm doing. This is a long cook. Going to take a long time. I have to go steady on my drinking. This is going to need a good, probably 3 hours in the oven. Oven's on. Wants to be 170. Actually, I didn't check that it is 170 yet. About that. Okay. But we're going to start on the hob. So, I've got my Dutch oven. And I've got just over 500 grams of light chuck steak, chopped up into chunks. And what we want to do is fry that off. Now, you're going to want onion, you're going to want garlic, you're going to want some baby onions. I'll have to tell you about that one in a minute. Old Sainsbury's won't win no chuffy badge for this one, I'll tell you. Anyway, you want about 150 grams ish of chestnut mushrooms, preferably nice and small, but if they're big, you cut them up. Some bay leaves, 2 tablespoons of tomato puree, 50 grams, I've got about 80, because it was a pack size, of lardons, or you can have streaky bacon and cut it up. About 50 grams of butter, some stock cubes, beef stock cubes, some corn flour, water, thyme, parsley. A lot of this doesn't go in until near the end. Oh, and of course, you're going to want a nice large can of bodies, cream and Manchester. But the first thing we're going to do is brown off this beef. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon or so of oil, and we get the heat on, get that up nice and hot, and then don't touch the fucking pan. Before I forget, I'll get my gloves out and put them there. Now, we're going to fry this in batches, because you try and chuck all that in there and fry it off, ain't going to work. And then we're going to transfer it as we brown it into a bowl. So, Boddingtons. Body shirt. This is bloody fancy. This is probably worth money. This is vintage. Vintage. Well, not quite. Apparently 50 years is vintage. Anyway, all I want to do is, like I say, we want to get that up to how it's hot, then brown it, take it out, chuck it in there until we brown that all off. Okay? And while we're doing that bit, I'll find some large wood. I've got a largest onion, and what I want to do is chop that up nice and fine. And I'm also going to want, I've got quite a lot of garlic there. You want at least 2 decent sized cloves. I'm going to peel them and mince them up. Okay? Because once we've browned our meat, we're then going to fry up our lardons, and then we're going to need the onions ready. And you've got to get all this done before it goes in the oven for about 2 hours. My onions diced, you know, nice and finely. I've got my garlic peeled ready for my masher, where I'll put that over there. I'm still working through my beef. I've turned the temperature a bit. So Boddingtons, what's Boddingtons, eh? Cream of Manchester. Well, bodies, as it's known, well, was known, well, still is, I suppose, became quite famous outside of Manchester for a series of adverts about the cream of Manchester. Now, you might say this is a bit like fake bodies, because this isn't brewed by Boddingtons. And to be honest, I don't think that tastes like Boddingtons. And I should know. I used to work in the quality control lab at Strange Ways. That explains a lot, doesn't it? There's a lot of water coming out of this beef. I'll have to drain this pot, I think. Yeah, Boddingtons was a beer brewed in Manchester, next door to Strange Ways prison. So it was known as a Strange Ways Brewery. It wasn't connected, well it was physically next to it, but it had no other connection, just name only. Boddingtons was a hoppy, straw coloured ale produced by Boddingtons. Nowadays, the cask ale has been revitalised about 2 years ago, I think it was. John Willie Lee's, another Manchester brewery, is brewing it under licence and trying to obviously get the old cask beer going again. But where Boddies really took off in terms of everybody got to know about it was when they kegged it. Canned it. And for a while, they almost stopped doing, or I think they did actually eventually stop doing the cask ale. Anyway, you might have noticed a bit of a play on the words. Boeuf Boddington. This is like Boeuf Bourguignon, but instead of French red wine, classic bodies. Got to be a bit careful because it's quite a hoppy one. Can make it quite bitter. So I've still just got to keep going through this beef. Right, that's the beef out. So I'm now going to put them lardons in there. I was going to put some more oil in, but I see what fat, because there's quite lumps of fat in that. We get the fat we get out of that. And then we're going to fry this, hopefully nice and crispy. Mad for it up here in Manchester. Crispy bacon. Although there's quite a bit of moisture in there. So, like I say, I was at Boddies, second in charge in the quality controller, 1986 to 1989. And towards the end of that time, Guinness launched Guinness in a can with a widget. And I remember sitting in the sampling room, as we would have to do at lunchtimes, things. I know this is Boddies, and we'd actually got some of these cans with these widgets in, not knowing what a widget was, and the widget foamed it up, gave me a nice good head. And it was like, well, how does this thing work? Is it like a little thing of gas or what? So we emptied, obviously, had to drink nothing, and then cut the can open, and there's this plastic thing in it, and it's like, well, if it holds gas, how's the gas stay in there? So we were trying to work it out, because, of course, some of this lardon is just fat. We were trying to work it out because this would be most Boddies drinkers would not drink that. The head on it's crap. Up north, we like a nice big thick head. Glasses are oversized, so you still get your pint, but you get a nice thick head on top. Down south, we don't like a huge head on our beers. Up there, if you served a Boddingtons without a head on it, they'd send it back to you and say, I ain't drinking that, there's something wrong with it. And so, when you did it in a cask and pump, you would have what did they call it? Was it a sprinkler or something like that? Basically, it was a bit like a little mini shower head, and so it would tend to make it all foam up as it went in your glass. But it was a bit difficult to replicate that, obviously, in a can. So we were thinking, or so the brewers were thinking, if we could somehow utilise these widgets we might better replicate our classic head from a can instead of just only through cask. And now these got a widget in. Can you hear it happening? Don't want to shake it up too much because I've got to open that soon to put in here. Don't worry, I have got others. That was the first. Yeah, and essentially it was Whitbreads bought out. They were part owners of Bodies, but they bought out the rest of Bodies, and then they transformed it into almost like a global product. And Melanie Sykes, pretty much unknown at the time, was starred in a series of adverts, all to do around the cream of Manchester and sort of stuff like this. There was big puns on famous adverts, so like, give me one cornetto. There was a pun on that, making it like, here you had like your ice cream, great big creamy head. But anyway, but it did. It ended up going from just pretty much a very regional beer to going across the country and being exported Canada. Well, feeling Korea, but anyway. So the other thing Bodies was famous for, not only was its pale straw colour, but its intense hoppiness, and that definitely ain't as intense as it used to be. And one of the drawbacks to cooking with a hoppy beer like that is it can increase the bitterness. Now, for those of you who don't do alcohol, by the time this is cooked, there will not be any alcohol left in it. Right, I need to just finish that off. It's starting to dry out a bit now. I should have tipped that moisture out, although a lot of that's come out of that bacon anyway. And then I'm going to chuck that in with the beef. Now, I should have said, by the way, you want to well season, salt, pepper your beef before you put it in. The first batch I forgot to do that, and then I didn't tell you that that's what to do, but that's what you've got to do. But yeah, this is all going in there, and then you're going to need your onions ready and your garlic. So my lardons are done. They're transferred in with the beef because it's all going to get chucked in together anyway. I've got a lot of fat out there. It drove off all that in water. Bang. And I've got a lot of bacon fat in there, so if you ain't got a lot, add some more oil. But now we're going to put those onions in there, and we want to gently cook them for about 5 minutes. Okay, actually I've just thrown that bowl in the sink, and I'm going to want that. Actually, I just thought, I can probably chuck them in there with that. Oh, another little interesting fact that probably hardly anybody would know. Again, while I was working for Bodies, Grada TV, Grada Studios, had built a brand new Coronation Street set. Now, what you see is really all fronts. When you see them inside, they're in sets set somewhere else. But they decided they were going to launch tours. So in between filming sessions and filming days and that, you could go and tour Corrie. And they did a replica Rover's Return, the pub. Now, classically, if you're a Corrie fan, you would know that the beer they served, I'm not sure if they still do anymore, because I've got a feeling there was a storyline where Newton Ridley sold out, but anyway. The beer was Newton Ridley, that was the brewer. And they said it would be good if people can go into the Rover's Return and order a pint of Newton and Ridley. Well, they're a fictional brewery. So they approached Bodies, and for a little while, I don't think it actually lasted very long. They probably then found someone cheaper. Where did that go? Go down my body shirt. Everything in the back. See? Yeah, but for a little while, if you went in there and you ordered yourself either a pint of Newton and Ridley, you were drinking Bodies. Right, so like I say, I want to cook this probably about 5 minutes gently, and then you can chuck that in there with the meat. Yeah. Yep, that can go in there. And then I will briefly cook for about a minute the mashed up garlic. Just realised I've been talking a load of bollocks. End of the day, I don't need to take the onions out, put them in there and then try the garlic. I'll put the garlic in towards the end of the onion cooking time, and then I can leave it all in here, because then everything else is going back in here. So there you go, a very brief potted history of Boddingtons. Manchester! What about Manchester? Well, I think I'm right in saying Manchester United is probably the biggest fan base of supporters, Manchester United Football Club, who've never ever seen Manchester United play live, and aren't even in England, yet they still support Manchester United. Living in Manchester, well, I didn't live in Manchester, I worked in Manchester, lived just outside Manchester. You were either a Man City supporter or a Man United supporter. They didn't get on with each other. A bit like Liverpool and Everton. One of my boys in the lab, he was Manchester City. He used to be a regular. Right, so we now add about 2 tablespoons of tomato puree. Okay, and get in there. I've got a few twigs or sprigs of fresh thyme, that's going in there. I've got some bay leaves, they're going in there. I've got about 150 mils of water, that's going in there. And then I've got this beef stock cube. I'm going to actually, it's a very pale colour, I thought they'd be browner than it. I'm going to add another one. We want a nice beefy flavour, and we've got to some extent try and cut back on that hoppiness, bitterness of the Bodies. And talking of Bodies, in a second we're going to put that in there, so the meat's gone in, and now in goes that Bodies. Now be careful, obviously you want a big enough pan that this all goes in, but equally it could well foam up. This one isn't. I'm wondering, don't know, I don't think we do. So now I'm just going to stir all that together. Okay, make sure it's all well mixed together, and that now in a second. So our mushrooms and baby onions, along with the butter and the corn flour and the parsley, are for much later on. Okay, but for now, what we're going to do, I was trying to work out what that red is, and I thought, oh, I've missed some meat, but it's, of course that's tomato puree. It's not all properly mixed in yet. So now a lid's going to go on that, and that's going to go in the oven for 1.5 hours. Now in 1.5 hours time, it isn't finished, but we're going to start preparing the mushrooms and the baby onions, because they will go in for about another hour. Okay, what we're hoping in an hour and a half is that meat has started to get really tender, falling apart tender. But for now, I've just about picked it up with my bare hands. That's going in the oven, and I'll see you in 5 seconds. Well, hour and a half, 5 seconds. All right, our kids, sorted. 2 hours in the oven. Okay, so we're at next stage. Now, oh, I didn't tell you that this is a recipe based on a Hairy Bikers Lancashire Hotpot. But this is Mancashire Hotpot, Boeuf Boddington. Having it large. Now, they said this is where you're going to want some baby onions or pickling onions. Can't find them anywhere. Absolutely nowhere. So got some small shallots. Now what they said you do, and I ain't going to do it with these, is when you got your baby potatoes, got your baby onions, put them in a heat-proof bowl and pour boiling water over them and let them sit for about 10 minutes. And then you peel them, and you want to cut them off at sort of like the ends so that they don't fall apart necessarily. So you've got to be quite close into the edge. Although that one, said don't cut that bit wonky. Dozy bastard. And then you're just going to peel them, and supposedly that boiling will actually help peel it better. Better job than I'm making here. Now what I might do with some of these, the bigger ones, is cut them up, and I suspect they will fall apart. And if that's the case, well, so be it. So you're going to want your butter. We've got about 50 grams of butter, and we're going to use half that butter to fry up these. So I'm just going to get this onions prepared, and then we get frying. All this time it's in the oven cooking. Longer the better. We want that meat fall apart. Sorted. So half that butter's gone in there. By the way, I've got my short kecks on. Some are in it. Having it large. I'll melt that butter down. Medium heat. And in that sort of melted and got a bit hot on, we're then just going to chuck them onions in there and sort of fry them up. Back my neck. About like something sticking down back my neck. Now, ideally, you want them sort of like golden brown on the outside. Actually, I've got a feeling you might want to touch it. Yeah. Just so that butter don't burn, we're just going to add a touch of oil to that. So we've not got much left now. You're going to want a heaped tablespoon of corn flour. And what we're going to do, there it is. You're going to add about a tablespoon of water to that, mix it up, and we're going to be using that as a bit of a thickener. Okay. The rest of that butter is for frying up our mushrooms, and then of course remember we want it parsley. Right, that's starting to get hot, so in they go, and we're just going to gently fry them, like I say, hopefully so we can brown them a little bit. Okay. podgies. Said you about cream of Manchester. 1987 was the first time it was advertised on telly. The comedian Frankie Howard, if you know who he is. You have to be an old git like me. But it also had the catchphrase that if you don't get bodies, you just get bitter. And that was Boddy's tagline up until about 4 years later. I think it was then they started doing all the cream of Manchester ones. Right, so what about Manchester then? That's what you tell us about Manchester. Tell you what, when I was moving up that way, everybody said to me, very friendly up north. Very friendly up north. Don't dispute that. And right from the outset, when I first moved up there, oh, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. All nice friendly. Want to know your business. Don't like reciprocating. I'm not saying they'd be nasty, but they're just quite happy to find out all about you. Just didn't seem quite so happy about telling you all about me. But anyway, that's nothing. So, just going to brown them off. Once they're brown, I'm going to put them back in this bowl and add the rest of that butter. Right, there's them onions out. So, like I say, remaining butter, get that in there, get that melted. Now, your mushrooms, I said about 150 grams, preferably button, chestnut mushrooms. If you can't get them or they're too big, chop them up. So, that was a bit bloody thing here. Just add another little dash of oil for that. And that's that. So, we're just going to try and brown off these mushrooms in that oil. I've perhaps got some of these a bit large, having it large, but I don't care, I like my mushrooms. So, yeah, see that's spitting out in bloody oil, butter all over me hob. So we just keep them sort of regularly stirring them, turning them around, get them mixed up, and then we'll be ready at this stage. Oh, I mixed up my cornflour and water. Manchester. What was I telling you about Manchester? I haven't told you anything about Manchester, have I really? It comes from the Latin name Mancunian or something bit like that, or Mancunian. Hence the reason Manchester people are often called Mancunian. So a very old town, very old city. Very, very important in the Industrial Revolution, particularly the cotton trade. Bit of controversy. But anyway, forget about the controversy a minute. Its other nicknames come from the Industrial Revolution. Cottonopolis, because it was the main centre for, like, I wouldn't say cotton making, but using cotton. It's also known as a warehouse city. That was partly connected to the Manchester Ship Canal. It used to mean that they could move a lot of their products in and out of the sea. And nowadays, it's widely known as the capital of the north, although Birmingham does get a bit upset about that one. Or Brummie gets a bit upset about that. They think they should be the capital of the north. Right, I'm just going to cook them for a little bit longer. Okay, it's out of the oven. Ooh, that's reduced down a lot. So, just going to put that to one side, and then we're just going to add that onion in, and in goes them mushrooms. Okay, put that there on top of that glass. Now we're just going to stir that in. Now, look very red. Manchester United. Okay. I might add a little bit more water to that, simply because we're going to add that corn flour mixture. Now, I think while I'm at it, I'm going to remove them sprigs of thyme that I can see in there. Okay, and I'm also going to remove any of them bay leaves that I can see. And not okay, because obviously they're going to have to come out anyway at some point. Oh, there's a big bugger. Oh, and there's another one. Now, I think that would. Oh, I can't touch the top of that. We're now going to take our corn flour mixture. Just take that off a minute. Don't touch the fucking pot. Okay, just give that a final mix in. In that goes. Now, we're going to stir that in. Almost forgot. We're going to stir that through. And it's now going to go back into that oven for another 45 minutes. Okay. And hopefully it should thicken up then. If we need to, we will add a little bit more corn flour mix, but I suspect that's not going to be necessary. Okay, so don't touch the fucking lid with your hands. Don't touch the fucking pot with your hands. So now it's going back in that oven 45 minutes, and then we'll be ready to finish off, bit garnish, and have a bit of scran. Top. Banging. Having it large. So I've chopped some parsley, and that's going to be final thing that's going to go on it. Got about 25 minutes left in the oven. And obviously I'm making sure I'm appreciating the bodies. Buzzing. Now, I'm saying to you about Manchester and the cotton trade, a bit of controversy. 1780, Richard Arkwright built the first cotton mill in Manchester. And I've got a feeling there was a bronze statue put up somewhere, whether it was near his first mill or not, along the ship canal. And recently it was toppled over into the canal because it was felt it was inappropriate to celebrate him. Now, even though he's the guy who essentially put Manchester on the map, like the almost like start of the Industrial Revolution, if you like, and made Manchester so important. Unfortunately, the reason everybody gets a bit upset is that he exported the cotton goods that they made in Manchester to Africa to pay for slaves to be transported across to America. So of course he's now a bit of a pariah because of that, and it's felt that, oh, we shouldn't be celebrating him. He was all part of the slave trade. Well, it's a bit of a knife edge, isn't it? Which way do you go? But anyway, that was him. But it did essentially become the textile manufacturing part of the of England, of the Industrial Revolution, and it made Manchester the first industrialised city. But again, there's still other controversy. You got the big riots about bread and labour and political recognition for the poor, the working class, and that. And 6th of August 1819, crowds gathered at St Peter's Square in Manchester. Now, estimates vary, both back then and more modern times, putting things on it. They said there was between 30,000 and 150,000 people crowded into the square peacefully. Okay. However, they gave the order to disperse the crowds, and they essentially had, well, like cavalry there, and they charged into the crowd. Literally, a crowd that were protesting but peacefully, they charged in, killed 18 of them, injured over 700 in what is now known as the Peterloo Massacre. Okay, keep pushing that bloody past now. So, not without its controversy. Anyway, I've got a couple of little other facts, because Manchester, not Manchester, Manchester. But we've got about 20 minutes to go, and then we're going to get that out, and we're going to get eating. Something. Having it. Right. Banging. Let's get scranning. So, oven off. Ooh. Get out of hot. Count the comes. So, I bet it's going to hiss. Now, a lot of liquid on top, but just stir that all in. Can you hear that hissing? Well, that's going to be a bath for cleaning this off. But there you go. The meat is literally falling apart. Everything looks banging top. So, just going to let that heat go off that a little bit. Manchester. During the 60s, Hollies, Herman's Hermits, the early Bee Gees, David Jones and the Monkeys, all performing out of Manchester. Manchester. And then in the 80s, it was essentially Manchester that sort of was the revival of the indie music scene. Take that off. And then you've got like the Happy Mondays, the Smiths, Morrissey from the Smiths, the Hacienda nightclub. But there you go. Oh, at one point, Manchester, I think was like, it might even still be one of the top places for nightlife. Anyway, I'm just going to take that parsley, chuck that in there. Let me just take that off, chuck that in. I've got my pint of bodies ready. I'm going to give that a stir through, and we're going to serve the bugger up. And here we are, our kid. Boeuf Boddington, Mancashire Hotpot. So, it's going to be good. Oh, that was mainly mastering. Can't see through these sunglasses. So I think it's a bit of meat. Nice earthy, beefy, tomatoey. Well, meat falls apart. That is banging, that is hot. And then of course, wash it down with a bit more bodies. Give it a go. Boeuf Boddingtons, Mancashire Hotpot.